Hi there, good morning. My name's Carl Miller. I'm the product development engineer at Split Second Log Splitters. We're going to do some general maintenance tips today on how to take care of the unit and make sure it's ready to split next time. We're going to use a machine that has about 50,000 splits on it to show some of those things, and we're going to do it first by removing these covers to get inside. We'll start by removing the covers on the log splitter. We'll need to remove 10 bolts that are around the perimeter. They're 1/2 inch size, and it's always better to take this left side off first. And to do that, we'll start by removing the bolts with a 1/2 inch socket and ratchet, or you could use a 1/2 inch wrench. Now we're going to learn how to grease the flywheel bearings on the log splitter. There's 2 of them, one on each side. And to find these, we'll rotate these flywheels around until the circular area shows us where the grease zerk's located. We use a number 2 or a 3 good quality lithium-based grease to do this. A standard grease gun. And we'll take the grease gun and push it onto the zerk until it snaps nice and clean, and we'll pump about 3 pumps of this grease in there. We do this about every 100 hours. You want to make sure that the grease does go into the zerk instead of piling up around it. We're going to talk about greasing the rack and pinion now. This is an example of a pinion shaft that's used on our log splitters. The rack and pinion are both manufactured and hardened in the United States. The pinion sits in the unit as such and has 2 flywheels mounted on each side. As the pinion rotates up to speed, the rack is engaged into it and pushed out to split the wood. We're going to talk about greasing these 2 items right now. What we're going to talk about now is the 2 most important maintenance tips on the splitter itself. Very important to keep this beam clean. We use a scraper to clean off the crud that the log leaves behind, and we also scrape underneath the top lips to keep it clean underneath here. The second thing is to make sure your bearings are always clean. As we pull this rack out, we find that there's a bearing located on each side of the rack. One underneath here, one underneath there. We also find a bearing at the very rear that rides on top of this I-beam, and that's why it's important to keep the top of the I-beam clean. This is a 1-inch sealed bearing that runs back here. We've created a groove in the top of the housing to relieve as much crud as possible. If there is any buildup, we take a scraper knife, lay it on the back of the bearing, and as we let this rotate back, it scrapes the top of that bearing off clean. If you notice your rack returning slowly and your beam is clean, it may be time to adjust the retention springs inside the housing. To adjust the retention springs on the rack located inside the housing at the rear of the splitter, we'll remove the spring from one hole and place it in a hole farther back, which creates more tension on the rack to pull it back faster. The farther back, the faster the rack returns. Now that we've done the general maintenance on the log splitter, we're going to put the covers back on and get back out and start splitting wood.